What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Charlie Hempseed podcast. I am your host, Charlie, and today is a Thursday episode of the Canna News. It is June 22nd, 2023, and I've got a couple really good articles pulled up. Let's go ahead and dive right in. The first one is on marijuanamoment.net. This is Biden review must fully deschedule and not merely reschedule marijuana to resolve state-federal conflicts. This is a good article. If you want to read it, it is on the marijuanamoment.net. I will briefly try to give you a synopsis of what is happening here. And basically this article is saying that just moving cannabis down on the Controlled Substance Act, let's say to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, is not going to do anything for really legalizing cannabis, because it's going to always have this conflict between federal and state laws. So what they really want is they want it to be completely legalized. And this is where it does start talking about that. Simply put, federal rescheduling cannabis does nothing to address the growing and untenable divide between state and federal cannabis laws. Following rescheduling, state laws authorizing citizens to possess cannabis for either medical or social purposes would continue to be in violation of federal laws, as it would be in thousands of state-licensed operators who currently serve these markets. And the DEA would still possess the same authority it has now to crack down on the state-regulated markets, should elect to do so. Some have suggested that rescheduling the cannabis plant may provide a greater opportunity for investors to conduct clinical research, but this result is also unlikely. Other impediments, such as requiring the U.S. Attorney General to approve marijuana-specific research protocols, are statutory and not specific to the marijuana scheduling in the Controlled Substance Act. So for these reasons, it says the author believes that the only productive outcome of the current scheduling review would be a recommendation to deschedule cannabis, therefore removing it from the Controlled Substance Act altogether and providing states with a greater discretion to establish their own distinct marijuana policies. And I completely agree with the author of this article here. It really doesn't do any good just to bump it down. What we need is legalization. How can a plant be a crime here? Let people grow it, let people smoke it, let people have it. I think when, a lot of people don't want to, either they just don't understand that cannabis is hemp, cannabis is marijuana, that's recreational, that's medical. Cannabis sativa, Cannabaceae, cannabis sativa, or indica, or rudialis. If you really want to break it down that far, it's all cannabis, and we shouldn't make a bunch of convoluted lines to try to figure out what is legal, what isn't legal. Can we circumnavigate these laws to make Delta 8 product? Can we, there's so many different things that are happening now in the cannabis industry as a whole, whether that's hemp, whether that's marijuana, whether that's medical, that have so many different lines, rules, and regulations, and people always try to find the gray lines in those things, and they're always trying to exploit them. So this is where I think it would be, in my opinion personally, better just to legalize it completely and get the government get their hands out of it, you know what I mean? So that was a good article, I thought. The next one I have here is still from the marijuanamoment.net. Schumer is confident the cannabis banking can pass. And that is not very much on this article other than this little bullet point here that he's confident that the marijuana banking bill will pass this session. And that's according to a cannabis entrepreneur that he spoke to recently. I heard last night, not that I was a South Dakota stoner bingo, that it was not going to pass. To me personally, I don't have anything to do with lawmaking, don't know any lawmakers. It just kind of doesn't make sense that it's not already passed, and it kind of feels like they've been biding their time for a reason. Usually, like what's the old saying in the UFC, if it takes this long to get a decision, so usually there's going to be an upset. And that's kind of how I'm feeling about it. It's like it shouldn't be that hard for the federal government to realize at this point in time that marijuana is not what they said it was, and we should stop making these people do cash businesses where are extremely dangerous, lots of robberies, employees been shot to death plenty of times, and that's literally all their fault because they won't allow banking on this substance, which is completely safe. So hopefully the Safe Banking Act will actually happen. I don't want to naysay it. I would love it to happen. I just don't know if it will. And of course, we're all questioning the government at this point in time. Next one is the DemocratandChronicle.com, and headline here is New York seizes 1,000 pounds of illicit marijuana worth about $10 million in a crackdown on illegal shops, which is crazy. Apparently, motherfucker, we need to move to New York. $10,000 pounds out there. That's unbelievable, right? So they said they seized 1,000 pounds of illegal marijuana products worth of $10 million in 31 different shops accused of illegally selling cannabis across the states. The raid of unlicensed cannabis stores began earlier this month as state agents with the Office of Cannabis Management began enforcing new state laws that in part increased civil and tax penalties for illicit cannabis sales. Crackdowns on illicit cannabis sales stemmed from mounting concerns that black market marijuana businesses pose a threat to both public health and legal marketplace, which has struggled to get rolling since New York legalized its adult-use cannabis industry in 2021. The 31 shops also face fines up to $20,000 per day if they get caught illicitly selling marijuana again, and the storefronts could be padlocked up for a year if and face further violations. What is something I want to point out about this article is the fact that with all of these different unlicensed shops, they are really concerned because the licensed cannabis shops sell products that are tested for unsafe contaminants to adults who are over 21, and that tax revenue is then a benefit to the communities who are the hardest hit by racially biased enforcement of prior marijuana laws. So the unlicensed cannabis stores are selling products potentially laced with unsafe ingredients, and they're also marketing to children by using candy-like products and packaging. So very interesting to think about, like the movie How High? No. Oh my gosh. Having a super blank right now. Wow, I can't think of it. That's crazy. Very interesting to think about the movie where they're in New York and they have to go to the bodega with Dave Chappelle, and he's like, it's black ass, you gotta do something crazy so the guys know you're the same person every time and you can still buy from them. And that was a long time. Wow, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on that name. Half Baked. It was Half Baked. And apparently there's still today plenty of illegal bodegas in New York area, which to me is kind of fun, but I do agree with what they're saying, that it's better in my mind if all of this product is tested for pesticide, heavy metal, and contaminants. Dude, fentanyl's crazy right now. I've heard of people dying off of fentanyl-laced weed. To me, it seems crazy, but I haven't bought any weed from somebody on the street in such a long time that it's not something that I have thought about, and Godspeed to all you people out there still doing it, because man, that's wild stuff. Next article is Fox9.com, the magical start to Minnesota marijuana seed market. In Minneapolis, Minnesota's marijuana market is a work in progress, and after a month the legislature legalized recreational cannabis for people over 21. Some local entrepreneurs are trying to get a head start the August 1st go date by starting with seeds. It's a tricky business. Cannabis legalization in Minnesota is like a fairy tale for Chris Schlins. He pictures himself as a modern-day Jack, trading thousands of dollars of what he calls beans. Magic beans, you know? We're going to grow some beautiful bean stalks. He says he bought marijuana seeds as collectibles for years. And the state laws changed, he started Soda Bean Company, and he wanted to share with others what he's been learning about cannabis. There's a lot of gray area when it comes to the magic beans. Planting one right and growing a beanstalk is not legal until August 1, but just having a bag of them won't get you into any trouble. And this is directly from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Seed, Weed, Hemp, and Biotech. The director, Denise Theed, no one is taking any action to remove those seeds from the marketplace. The state does intend to enforce anything but egregious violations from now on. Doesn't intend to enforce anything but egregious violations from now on. Theed says the Department of Agriculture will start licensing businesses to label seeds they can sell as of August 1st. The license costs $75, but it also requires the seeds to undergo germination testing and purity and noxious exams, making sure the seeds work and that they're not mixed with problem plants. Now, this is pretty standard in the state of South Dakota. You can legally sell seeds, and you have to have a seedsman license. You have to go through the Department of Agriculture, and you have to certify that your seed is certified weed-free. Now, according to the 2018 Farm Bill, and the DEA just followed up with this, I want to say it was this year even, that seeds themselves do not contain THC, even though the seed might produce a plant that contains THC down the road. The seed itself does not have THC in it. So they are saying that seeds can be sold legally online through multiple states as long as people have the seedsman license. And that's pretty easy to do. As you see here, I think in our state it's $50, and this article is $75. And to certify that it's not weed-free, if you've ever seen a cannabis seed, I probably have one sitting around on the desk somewhere. The seeds are large and really identifiable. So that being said, here's a packet of seed right here. I've got a couple different seeds, and they are taped to a sticky note. So large, super identifiable. If, for instance, if you ever seen like the top of a marigold, that little cluster of seed head, that you have to make sure there's nothing else like a marigold seed in there, or just some random seed like an elm seed or cottonwood seed. You have to make sure that it's weed free. A weed is technically anything that is not intended to be grown where you want it to be growing. So anything can be a weed. And this is just basically saying you're selling 100% cannabis seed, not any other seeds mixed in with your cannabis seed. Next article, Forbes.com. Nevada governor signs marijuana reforms bill into law. And this is a really cool one. It's quite long, and I'm super proud of Nevada and everybody working to make these kind of things happen. It makes legalization on the nationwide scale seem much more reasonable, and it took one giant step for mankind, right, to legalize cannabis. Now these guys are taking another giant step forward in the legalization of cannabis itself. So let's dive into what I'm talking about here. Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo last week approved a bill that makes several reforms to the state's marijuana laws, including more than doubling the limit on adult-use cannabis possessions and purchases. The omnibus measure, Senate Bill 277, was signed by the Republican governor on May 14. According to a report from online cannabis news, the marijuana and after receiving approval from the state legislature earlier this month. The new laws make several significant changes to the Nevada's laws governing marijuana. In 2001, the state legalized medical marijuana, followed by the legalization of adult-use cannabis with the passage of Question 2, a 2016 ballot measure that legalized recreational marijuana in Nevada for adults 21 and older. The legalization more than doubles the possession and purchase limits for recreational marijuana in Nevada, raising the cap from 1 ounce of cannabis to 2.5 ounces. The measure also doubles the limits for cannabis concentrates from 1/8 of an ounce to 1/4 of an ounce. The legislation also permits the all-adult use cannabis dispensaries in Nevada to sell cannabis products to medical marijuana patients. Beginning next year, state regulators will no longer be able to issue new licenses for medical marijuana businesses except in areas of the state that have prohibited the operation of recreational marijuana dispensaries. So this is cool to me because, like in our state of South Dakota, even in the law states that we're going to have reciprocity, we still have not allowed that. And it's such a shame that our lawmakers and that our dispensaries are in such gridlock and fear that they aren't allowing out-of-state cannabis medical card patient holders to come into our state and buy product here. We're losing out on tons of tourist dollars that are just simply medical patients. All we have to do is allow it. Why aren't we? One of the things also here is the new law eases cannabis industry employment restrictions, which they are going to have people who have prior felony convictions. They can apply to the state to have that waived, and they can still work inside of the medical or the recreational marijuana industry inside of Nevada. So, under the bill, individuals with such convictions will be permitted to petition to the state to work at a licensed cannabis business without first having their records expunged. And why not? Especially if these felonies have anything to do with cannabis, why would we prevent them from working in the cannabis industry if they have a felony from a previous law that had to do with cannabis? It's a shame, and I would really like to see more states do something like that. I'm not saying we have to allow violent felons to do it, but especially if you're a felon because you did something with cannabis and only cannabis, then maybe we should still let you work in the cannabis industry. I'm all about that. So, next article. Another one from the MarijuanaMoment.net. The California Assembly Committee approves bill to legalize marijuana cafes that already passed Senate. This one, as I read it through it, I was getting frustrated because we used to live in this land, the land of the free, man. It seems as we've gotten further along all of the laws. It's so frustrating as an American that there is a law on top of a law on top of a law on top of a board on top of an agency that you have to get through everything, and it's so freaking ridiculous, man. So this is all about literally just allowing so under this proposal, retailers and micro businesses that receive authorization from local governments would be able to allow adults 21 and older to smoke, vaporize, and ingest cannabis products on their premises, where visitors could also prepare and sell non-cannabis food and beverage products. So they are literally jumping through hoops and trying to make a law just so they can sell fucking Gatorade and popcorn to people after they smoked weed at their little lounge. It's like, dude, why is there so much regulation on that? Jesus. I'm kind of like, if you go to Thailand, people are cooking meals on the side of their moped, a little wok and a little gas propane heater source, and give me all the street food. I'll have a case of the runs, whatever. Let me smoke in the lounge and be able to buy Gatorade and whatever else I want without having to go through crazy licensing processes. What is that? This is why California's marijuana industry is failing, obviously. Next one is the ColumbianMissourian.com. The ColumbiaMissourian.com. This is an interesting article. Plenty of other articles talk about this as well. Marijuana impairment on the road is difficult to measure, prove, and enforce. So, the legalization of recreational marijuana in Missouri has raised questions and concerns about the DUI cases in the state. In the state of Missouri, a simple first-time DUI offense is considered a Class B misdemeanor, which carries with the possibilities of a $1,000 fine and 6 months in jail. Yet, despite the widespread legalization of recreational marijuana throughout the country, officials in Missouri have yet to establish a consistent process to test for active impairment, in contrast to the traditional breathalyzer used for alcohol. Unlike alcohol, the presence of marijuana in the blood does not necessarily indicate intoxication. There is also no national definition for marijuana-impaired driving, and law enforcement agencies lack the tools to catch people driving high. Although driving after consuming any mind-altering substances can technically lead to a DUI, Missouri has no threshold to indicate what level of marijuana consumption qualifies as intoxication in Missouri. According to Stephanie Lunsford, the Randolph County prosecutor, there is no concrete way to determine when someone is considered intoxicated with marijuana in Missouri. Sometimes there are more challenges to drug impairment because of that, Lunsford said. The lack of clear-cut rules and procedures means marijuana-impaired driving remains within a gray area. In Colorado, drivers can be arrested after observed impairment by a law enforcement officer, whether it's from cannabis or a combination of cannabis and alcohol and other drugs, according to the Colorado Department of Health and Transportation. Known as the per se marijuana DUI laws, states like Colorado require THC in a driver's blood at 5 nanograms a milliliter or higher, which is crazy because if you took my blood right now, I couldn't even fucking imagine what nanograms would be in my blood. I couldn't even imagine. I'm sure it's through the roof. Missouri, on the other hand, does not have these requirements, which complicates the issue. According to attorney Ben Faber, impairment must be proved in court, which can be difficult when it's based on performance in a field sobriety test. With marijuana, THC in the blood alone is not enough to prove impairment. If they're able to show that there is actually active THC in their blood, and the question is the person impaired? Faber said, there's no proof, there's no presumption that the person is impaired based on the presence of THC. With the lack of technical processes and tools in place, testing for impairment will come down to the trained eye of the officer or even a field sobriety test. Both are difficult to prove in court without substantial evidence. In Illinois, a person who holds medical cannabis registry card is granted immunity from that part of the marijuana DUI law, which prohibits driving or being in physical control of a motor vehicle at or above the THC limit of 5 or more nanograms or whole blood of 10 or more nanograms, other than bodily substances. See, this is cool. And the drug is not legal yet at the federal level, and determining how to handle the DUIs might be a contributing factor. And this is something that's been covered on many YouTube channels, many articles. There's a really cool Dr. Sanjay Gupta YouTube video that they did, and they actually had people on a closed course drive, people who were regular cannabis users and people who were first-time cannabis users and people who were occasional users. And people who were first-time users or occasional users were extremely impaired, and people who were everyday regular smokers with medical cards, they were not impaired at all. They were able to get in and drive extremely proficient. So I think it's an interesting conversation to have with every state, but If you're a state lawmaker listening to this video, or if you're even questioning whether it's possible if a medical marijuana patient can operate a vehicle under the influence of marijuana, instead of just naysaying it immediately, what we should do is test it. Let's get them on a closed course. Let's administer them from a sober to a point where they're so inebriated that they tap out. We can't drive anymore. We don't feel safe operating this thing even on a closed course. That's what I would say we should. Let's push the envelope. Let's really get the data, and let's do it with lots of different types of smokers: occasional smokers, first-time smokers, people who have medical cards, that all-day, everyday smokers. And we need across the board data, not just isolated incidents, and that's what real science is. All right, next one. This is the WSBTV.com. The DEA shuts down marijuana growing operation at Sandy Springs home. 2 men are in jail after being accused of running a marijuana growing operation in Sandy Springs home. The Drug Enforcement Administration of Atlanta conducted a search warrant at a home on Kitty Hawk Drive. Authorities said that a lengthy investigation led to the uncover of a marijuana growing operation at the home. Detectives found 540 marijuana plants, 135 pounds of cultivated marijuana, an AR-15 rifle, psilocybin mushrooms, $37,000, and evidence connected to the manufacture and sale of marijuana. These guys were not playing. They were out there blowing out a house. 540 plants in a house. That is crazy. I wonder how big the house was. Next one is the KDVR.com. And Colorado marijuana prices rise for the first time in 2 years. The COVID pandemic sparked a big change in marijuana prices. Sales reached their highest level ever between summers of 2020 and 2021, and the price retailers pay for bulk cannabis has crashed ever since. The average market price per pound of Colorado marijuana bud has been falling since early 2021, according to the Colorado Department of Revenue figures. In January 2021, bud was at the highest price since 2016 at $1,731 per pound. By April 2023, it had shrunk to less than half that price at $649 per pound, the lowest price ever recorded since Colorado began its first legal marijuana sales. This month, though, retail prices have ticked upwards. The price for a pound of bud went from $649 to $703 in June. This is the first time retail has risen since October of 2021. If you're watching the video here, I have a nice bar graph of the income that's been changing since 2014 to 2023. This is the longest stretch of time since legalization that the marijuana prices have been so low. They've reached a low point in 2018 but promptly rose again through the pandemic. Since early 2022, they have been on average... Sorry about that. Wow. What's going on? Okay, so hopefully this worked, and I'm able to add that in. Colorado and Texas governors come together over psychedelics in a Denver psychedelic conference. This is on westward.com. Just recently, they had a Colorado Convention Center, and it was a multidisciplinary association of psychedelic studies, and they held a session in Denver that was about 5 times larger than the last psychedelic science gathering in 2017 held in Oakland. During this event, the founder, Rick Doblin, started the organization nearly 40 years ago, held the first event at a gathering in Oakland in 1990. Standing in an all-white suit in front and packed of a crowd of 5,000 people at the convention centers in Belco Theater, Doblin reflected on how far the movement has come. Not only did Governor Jared Polis, but also former Governor Rick Perry of Texas appeared on stage after Doblin. And Perry said he doesn't consider himself a full advocate on psychedelics, but became interested in natural medicine's potential to treat post-traumatic stress after meeting former Navy SEAL and lone survivor Arthur Marcus Luttrell in 2006. Subsequent talks with Luttrell and other military veterans suffering from trauma made Perry a believer in the potential of mental health benefits from psilocybin, MDMA, and other psychedelic substances. The reason I am on this stage today, and hopefully a lot of you are on this way, is because you had the courage to understand that your reputation is not more important than these young people's lives. Let's look at what the results are. Let's not look at what the government is telling us. Let's not look at what somebody is telling us is right and wrong. Those words right there is why I put this article in here. That is so freaking impactful to me. To people here in the South Dakota state, we need to look at pro-cannabis information and start making our laws on pro-cannabis information, not fear-mongering, not old stuff that is false or misleading. Here we go. And Missouri is to be testing ground on plain packaging for cannabis products. They're going to make all cannabis products going into plain packaged things in Missouri because they are claiming that it's going to get into the hands of kids easier. And this is my piece on this. I'm going to say it. I don't have kids. I don't want kids. I personally do not think that we should be regulating anybody's products or product packaging based on the thought process of it getting into the hands of a kid. That is upon how we sell it to people who are 21 years and older. It then comes back down to people who decide to have children. Keep it out of your kids' hands, and that's not my fault. I think that we should let freedom grow, and that doesn't mean to limit these companies' ability to have cool packaging because you think your kids are going to like it because it looks cool, because we like it, because we're adults and it looks cool. It makes sense. So, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I will be back next week with another Canna News episode, and I'll see you next time.